Welcome back. You're still watching Opinion Court. Now, our top story on Opinion Court tonight is about the chaos in schools as more chaos hits schools over transfers head teachers as IG Boynet orders arrest of perpetrators. Now, that's a massive transfer of head teachers across the country that is receiving a cold reception. Some of the residents, including politicians, taking it upon themselves to go to schools to actually hound away some of these officers. To discuss this with me this evening, we're privileged to have Edward Kisiangani, Professor Edward Kisiangani. Karibu sana. You are a resident analyst on Opinion Court. It's good to have you as well. Happy New Year.
Thanks, Fred. Happy New Year to everybody and the whole country.
Yes. Prof is also a university lecturer and a teacher trainer.
Yes.
So yes, you do. You are actually the right person to discuss these things. We also have Dr. Sam Kamau, university lecturer at the Aga Khan University, also a teacher by profession. Karibu sana. Happy New Year as well.
Happy New Year.
Yes, today we are discussing matters to do with education. Of course, remember you can use the hashtag Opinion Court. Get with the conversation on Twitter at Citizen TV Kenya is our Twitter handle. My Twitter handle is at Fred Indimoli. You can also text us on 22422. Gentlemen, this thing came up last year. Of course, it has been part of the plan for quite a number of years, since 2015, only being effected towards the end of last year. Why do you think it is receiving such a cold reception? Let's start with you, Dr. Sam.
I think, Fred, this is part of a growing culture of national indiscipline that we saw a while back. I think it was in Uasin Gishu, the senator led a group of politicians to the university, I think, of Eldoret, to protest about the vice-chancellor. And then we also saw, as part of our politics, again, a group of politicians protesting in the streets seeking the removal of IEBC. And I think it's a culture that is now growing, but it is worrying when it gets to our schools because rotation and transfers at times is part of good HR practice. And it shouldn't generate the kind of reaction that we are seeing. But I think part of our growing, what I'm calling national indiscipline, because when you see politicians storming a school to purportedly eject a school head, for whatever reason, because I think this is something that has been going on in the ministry in terms of transferring teachers and head teachers. And I think the intention is good. Perhaps at this time where we're pushing so many reforms, educational reforms, is bound to receive some kind of political resistance. But it's not something that should be encouraged. It's actually unacceptable because people, especially public or civil servants, have a right to serve Kenyans in any part of the country. Yes. So I only see it as an extension of this culture of it's just indiscipline. So
to you, it's a cultural problem, but it could be a political problem as well. We're seeing quite a number of politicians getting into the fray. Actually, MCAs especially. We've had a problem with the members of the county assemblies, probably because they do not understand their role. Do they play any role when it comes to the transfer of principals, head teachers? Education is not even a devolved function. Why are you MCAs even coming into this debate, Prof?
I think you've rightly stated that, Fred. It is lack of, there are two things that describe the situation. Lack of understanding of what the Constitution says, and especially Schedule 4 of the Constitution, which says that higher education is in the hands of the national government. But second also is the culture. He calls it national indiscipline. I call it the culture of the jungle mentality, which has hit our country for a very long time. That people don't even understand what they are supposed to do. This jungle mentality is consistent with pre-government societies, and this is not right for our country. So the politicians, just like anybody has an interest in education. That is not wrong. They must express their opinion. But what does the Constitution do? We should express our sentiments within the Constitution. The law says that you can picket, you can demonstrate, you can petition. But there is no law in this country, not even the Constitution, which empowers people to eject others from stations. That is primitive, and it does not help anybody. Secondly, Fred, education is a very technical thing. Certain considerations that go into the transfer of head teachers or redistribution of head teachers are high technical. I don't think that the MCAs have the capacity to understand that. For example, there has been this tired argument, and I've been hearing it since the start of the year, that some people have mini grade 4, so they are being posted to schools which have mini grade 9. The technical part of it is this. that in essence, certain schools, especially schools like Alliance High School, Friends School, Kamsinga, being national schools, they take the top layer of students who have done very well at standard 8. And therefore, these students start off with certain advantages and they're easier to guide to get S. But there are teachers who get students who got 250 marks at standard 8 level.
Are you saying that some of these head teachers who are being moved, where parents and even some of these politicians are complaining that that head teacher actually helped the school to perform very well, and why are you moving? Are you saying that these head teachers whose schools have performed very well should not be taking the applause for that performance?
Most of them, they can take some applause, but it's not totally, they are not totally the reason why those schools are doing well. Some schools have tradition, other schools have, and most of the top schools have taken top layer students at standard 8.
Yes.
And they have top layer students. You know, I want to give you an example, Fred. And this is a serious matter. You know, the matter that we're talking about is this. If you take Jose Mourinho, or you talk of Pep Guardiola, and you tell them to coach Harambee Stars to the World Cup, he will have challenges because he has to start teaching basic what? Basic ball skills. And if he just does that and probably reaches some quarter-final of sorts in Africa and starts showing, you should give him credit more than taking Pep Guardiola to start coaching.
But that's an argument. That's an argument would work in reverse. If at all you take the current coach of Harambee Stars and you take him to Manchester United players will have questions. The same way, if you take a principal from a school that has not been performing very well and you bring him to a school that has previously or just performed exemplary from last year, parents will, of course, have a concern.
Not necessarily, Fred, and I think the other thing we need to bring out, maybe two important issues. One, the flimsy excuses being given for seeking to bar, the transfer of some of these teachers. They are talking about performance, and maybe this person had not performed well in another school. That's a flimsy excuse. But you realize there are other reasons. Some of them is just political. The other is that some of these principals could actually, the ones who have been transferred, some of them could actually be involved in trying to also to mobilize support from the MCAs and the other local leaders to actually protest and show that we actually want this person to remain, because they have also established networks. I think the idea that if you have served in one location or in one specific school for about 9 years, it is also okay if you're actually so good, you can transfer the same skills, again, using the same argument, and go and make another school better. But it could also be that, and I said earlier that it is part of good HR practice. At times you also move people around so that they can also gain that experience also in a good school. But the other thing I wanted to bring is what you call the ripple effect, because we saw this happen yesterday in Bungoma. We have seen it happen today
in Kibwezi and Kapenguria.
Yes, and Kapenguria. So there's something, unless it is is likely to continue, because it's just like the school strikes and the school fires, that it starts here and then the thing starts going around. But I also think you have noticed there could also be another dangerous angle that is coming in about ethnicity again. Yes. So these are important issues that need to be addressed, and perhaps it was a bold move now in Kibwezi to arrest those MCAs because it's not their role and they were actually breaking the law.
You know, Fred, we cannot sit on national television as citizens of this country and encourage our citizens to chase away head teachers from schools. Very soon they will say they will require local policemen, they will require local county commissioners, they will require local DOs of sorts. Where will the country do? In fact, this is the first point at which you start tearing the country in pieces. So therefore, you just said earlier on a small thing about getting the coach of Harambee Stars. These teachers, the principals that you see across the country, are our students in the local universities. Most of them are trained at either Kenyatta University or Moi University. So the training is the same, but they work in different environments. Everybody needs to change the environment and then see whether they can perform better or not. There are several factors that go into results. It's not just waking up and saying you have 4.0 and then you can manufacture 9.0. It's not going to work that way.
Let's look at the HR angle of it, this issue of delocalization. Now, it is a policy that if at all you come from this particular county, you cannot be posted to that same county. You'll have to go elsewhere. Is it really necessary? Is it is in the TSC going into a lot of trouble to ensure that this happens, and probably that's why they find themselves in this mess?
Again, the thinking behind it, I think, is good and acceptable. In the fact that we are saying people should be free to work in any part of the country, especially if they are public servants. So the idea itself is good, and we talk about...
but is this freedom absolute? Because now you're saying you should be free to work anywhere, but they're saying you cannot work in your home county.
Absolutely, because, and look at it this way, they were saying the people, the 500 who have been affected are people who have been serving in a particular station or a particular school for the last, for about 9 years, yes, or more. And I think part of it, again, improving, because you see there's a culture that develops with the person's leadership for the time they have been there. I think it is also okay if we could get to transfer people from one region to the other as part of, again, building cohesion and integration. Because if we start looking at this school in our region, this is our school, we would also insist that the students who come to this particular school should also be the only ones from this county. And again, when we talk about national schools, for example, is a national resource in that sense that should take up students from
but is it necessary, Prof? Yes. Actually saying that if you come from Kakamega, you cannot head a school in Kakamega?
You see, we have a problem in this country. The government is responding to a particular problem. Localization of everything, and there's the politics of exclusion that you think when you have a national institution like the school, or you have, for example, Kenya Ports Authority, then it is for locals. But this is not what the Constitution says. So a deliberate move is being made. It's not necessary, but we have a problem we are trying to solve. We need some kind of integration in our country, and we realize that the people are not doing the right thing. Look at what has happened. If you look at, let's pick the case of Bungoma yesterday, French School Kamsinga. You know, Cleopa Maili, the Minister for Health, has built an organized fund to build a dormitory in French School Kamsinga. He doesn't come from that area. So when you say you want a local person and you chase away a principal who comes from another region, what about the students who land in that school and don't come from that region? Should they shut their eyes to the school, and if the school calls for assistance, they don't? Everybody must be proud of a school they go through. I didn't go to a university in Western Province or Western Kenya. I went to the university in Nairobi, and I'm proud of that university. It is very difficult for me even to relate to Masinde Muliro.
But you should also not be denied. You should also not be denied the opportunity to head a school in Kakamega or to actually.
They are not being denied a school. Some of the heads who have been moved have stayed in those schools for quite a long time, and you know, some part of the resistance, they have even ended up looking, claiming ownership of that school. That's where they wanted to retire.
Okay.
Now, if you look at the Constitution, Fred, it talks about non-discrimination. Why are we treating teachers different from police officers? Why are we treating teachers different from doctors and other people, other civil servants who are always transferred from one end to another? What is so special about this?
Okay. And Fred, I have to remind you that in the early days of devolution, this problem was also in the health sector, yes, where some counties actually had a problem with doctors who are not from that particular region, and there was a problem of resistance of some of these doctors. But what they discovered later is that some counties actually did not have enough locals or natives who come from those particular counties, and therefore they had to welcome people who come from other counties. If we are going to go by that argument, you might discover that some particular regions or some schools, they may not have necessarily enough trained teachers to serve in that particular region. And therefore, the idea of looking at this as a local issue, as a local school, and therefore the people who can serve is not good. And the way Prof is saying that if you extend this now to the doctors, you extend this to the police, it would end up being a problem. Okay. And that is why I'm saying the ripple effect is not good, because you can see the same thing replicating itself across other sectors. Okay. And it's part of what I'm calling national indiscipline.
Finally, as we end this interview, National Union of Teachers, KNUT, has opposed this mass transfers. Wilson Sossion, the Secretary General, has even threatened to call for a teachers' strike. We're still waiting for that. He claims that the mass transfers could demotivate and demoralize teachers, and he also accuses the CS and TSC of failing to consult. Curiously, CS Matiang'i has been accused of failing to consult quite widely on more than one occasion.
I will just tell you this, because I don't want to, Sossion is a respected person in this community, so we really don't want to pick so much out of it. But what we want to point out is, let's stick with the law. The first day a teacher is posted in a high school, I think this station and other media houses have a duty to even display the letter of appointment for every teacher who is appointed at TSC. One of the things it says is that if you accept this condition, one of the conditions is that you are free, you are liable to teach anywhere in the Republic. That is what other civil servants get. So when it comes to consultation, quote unquote, do you consult people for deployment? Deployment is not a matter of the trade union, because you can still be deployed anywhere. But there are matters about remuneration which are for the trade union. My brother is talking about national indiscipline. This is the jungle, mentality where everybody wants to be consulted. Even when they want to go to the toilet, they will want to be consulted. This is not the correct thing to do. Consultation also must be, harmonized with what is in law provided for you to do. If I say that today, if the president, for example, decides that a county commissioner in a certain place is not doing a good job, how much can he consult? Does he call parliament? Okay. There are certain duties that are assigned to people when they are in office. So TSC is the employer and has a right to deploy its staff in the best interests possible. Okay. If it thinks that principals should be moved, they should be moved. It is also good for our country. When I was going to school in Fred, I went to school in Western Province, and one of my principals came from Nyeri. And I didn't have any issue that he even made me a house prefect. And so I stayed there, and then it came this way. So how bad am I as a citizen for having a principal who comes from another thing? So this discrimination against principals, the excuse is that they are not very, it is because they have a low mean. That's not the truth. The truth is that it's tribal. They don't want people from other ethnicities to come to their areas, which is wrong.
It is tribal.
Curiously, Fred, while the Kenyan National Union of Teachers has opposed this, the National Heads Association has actually supported this move. So I'm not exactly sure who Sosion then is speaking on behalf, because on whose behalf Sosion is speaking, because these are the people who are directly affected by these mass transfers, and they have actually embraced and accepted and told the teachers to cooperate. There's something that confuses me. Prof doesn't want to talk about Sosion, but there's something that confuses me about Sosion nowadays. Whenever he speaks, I'm not always sure whether he's speaking as, the Kenyan National Union of Teachers guys, or at times also a member of parliament. At times it's a bit confusing, because it's not very clear, because you have associated him more with the teachers union. But like Prof mentioned, this is not actually an issue of the teachers union. If the ministry has made a decision, a policy, and they think that this is actually the right thing in terms of whatever the intention is, and the National Heads Association is supportive of this, like I said, there are flimsy excuses being used, especially by the MCAs that we saw. The real underlying reasons are very different. Some of them, as Prof has said, they are tribal, they are ethnic, and that is why I'm saying this is dangerous. And I actually commend the move by the police to arrest those 6 MCAs to make sure that we can stem this tide, because we don't want the same thing to keep happening.
Gentlemen, finally, even as you give your final comments, and this is about generally the education sector, away from probably what you're saying, because this is just part of the many reforms that CS Fred Matiang'i has undertaken in the education sector. Now, the fact that in naming his new cabinet, President Uhuru Kenyatta named CS Fred Matiang'i as in charge of Interior, but acting Cabinet Secretary for Education. Many have actually said that most of these reforms in the education sector are dependent on CS Matiang'i staying in that docket. Do you agree with that statement as you make your final remarks, Prof?
I think before I talk about Matiang'i, I just want to tell you this. If, for example, the Kenya National Union of Teachers tries to call a strike, I can tell you on this television station, it will fail, because the classroom teachers, most of them across the board, are happy that the principals have been moved. So
the teachers are happy?
The teachers are happy. Have you had any complaints? These complaints are coming from outside. So the teachers are happy. Maybe some principal had overstayed and was mistreating the classroom teachers, and now has been moved. So they are happy to have a new person with the new ideas. So who is going to go on strike? The second thing, and we wait for that. The second thing that I want to talk about is about CS Matiang'i. Actually, in my view, I would have preferred Matiang'i to remain in education, because he represents the broom of change within the Ministry of Education. But I think in his consideration, probably, you cannot, also centering reforms on an individual is not good. I think government has a policy on what it wants on education, and there are principles which have to be followed. And I think Matiang'i has been probably more effective in putting to practice what is required of him as a minister. So what we just need is that we know that Matiang'i has done his bit, but another Kenyan can still perform as well. All they need is to be given a scheme of work to operate within. And I'm sure the scheme is there, and another Kenyan will do that. The dilemma the president has, Fred, is this. Probably he has not had, just like President Kenyatta had Michuki, Uhuru Kenyatta has not had a minister like Matiang'i. So Matiang'i fits in so many ministries. And Interior has also problems. And I think probably he says, let me now take him to Interior. He sorts out a couple of things there. But because he has shown the way,
let's have Matiang'i.
Yes, he needs 4 or 5 Matiang'is. And the president, we appeal to him, even if he's in South Africa, let him think about bringing 10 Matiang'is in his cabinet, and he will do a good job.
It will be much easier for
I think in my closing remarks, while I agree Matiang'i has been the face of the reforms in the education sector, at times pushing it with a lot of gusto, I think it's also important that we allow the structures and the institutions that have been set in place. Perhaps his work was to sweep and clean whatever mess was there, or at least initiate those reforms. But I'm sure if the other ordained institutions and structures that have been set could actually take these reforms and move them forward. I'm sure there was a reason why the president thought that he would be best served by having Matiang'i in the Interior Ministry, and perhaps he has identified an individual perhaps who will perform better, because we didn't know Matiang'i prior to 2013, and therefore there could be individuals who will be brought to help push. But you have to remember that most of these reforms have already been initiated in the different sectors, and they are quite ambitious, by the way, and there will always be the challenges that come with these reforms. But I think there is momentum, and if these are successfully implemented, then we are likely to see the long-term changes and effects.
Dr. Sam Kamau, Aga Khan University lecturer, also a teacher's trainer. I was looking at your profile, and you've been training teachers. Professor Edward Kisiangani, resident analyst on Opinion Court, university lecturer as well. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for helping us look into this chaos that's affecting our schools. Time now for another break. When we come back, we'll have the sports news.